Kang Taemin sat at his small desk in the dormitory room, typing on his laptop. The room was quiet, except for the soft humming sound coming from his roommate's side of the space. Veltar, his alien roommate, was doing something with his strange blue devices again. Taemin had stopped asking what they were months ago. The phone rang. Taemin picked it up and smiled when he heard his grandmother's voice. "Taemin, my boy, how are your studies going?" Park Hee-jin asked in her warm voice. "Very well, grandmother. I just finished my report on soil nutrition. How are your flowers?" "Oh, you should see them. My breeding program is going so well this year. I have 3 new varieties already, and I think I will have 5 more by next month." Taemin laughed. "You and your orchids. You work harder than any scientist I know." "It takes patience, dear boy. Good breeding always does. You have to choose the right parents, create the perfect environment, and wait for the right time. Then you must be very gentle and careful when you bring them together." Veltar's humming stopped. The alien's large dark eyes turned toward Taemin, listening carefully to every word. "Tell me more about the new ones," Taemin said, not noticing his roommate's attention. "Well, I have been working on crossing my white beauty with the purple giant. They are very different, but I think their children will be amazing. The white one is delicate and pure, while the purple one is strong and bold. Together they should make something wonderful." "That sounds complicated." "It is. I have to control the temperature just right. Make sure they get enough water but not too much, and the light must be perfect. Too much sun and they will die. Too little and they will not grow properly. And timing." "Oh, timing is everything in breeding." Veltar slowly put down his blue device and moved closer to Taemin's desk. His 3-fingered hands held a small recording device that he always used for his research. "How do you know when the time is right?" Taemin asked. "Experience, my dear. 40 years of breeding has taught me to read the signs. When they are ready, you can see it in their color, their posture, how they respond to touch. Then you must act quickly but carefully." "Grandmother, you make it sound like magic." "Not magic science, but science with love and patience. Good breeding cannot be rushed. The best results come from understanding your subjects, caring for them, and creating the perfect conditions for success." Veltar's eyes grew wider. In his home planet, reproduction was simple. His species mixed genetic material in laboratory containers. There was no emotion, no careful timing, no special environments. This human breeding process sounded incredibly advanced and complex. "I must go now, grandmother. So Young is coming over to study." "Ah, your girlfriend. She is studying plants too, yes? Maybe she can help with my breeding program sometime." "I will ask her. She would love that." "Good. Young people should learn these things. Breeding is an art that must be passed down." After Taemin hung up, Veltar approached him carefully. "Friend Taemin, may I ask about your conversation?" "Of course, Veltar. Just talking to my grandmother about her flowers." "Flowers? But you spoke of breeding." "Yes, she breeds orchids. She creates new types by mixing different parent plants together." Veltar nodded slowly, but his understanding was completely wrong. In his mind, Taemin's grandmother was some kind of expert in human reproduction. The careful timing, the perfect environments, the gentle touching. It all sounded like a sophisticated mating ritual system. "Your grandmother is very wise in these breeding matters?" "Oh yes, she is famous for it. People come from all over the city to see her work and ask for advice." This confirmed Veltar's misunderstanding. Humans had breeding experts, specialists who helped others with reproduction. His own species had nothing like this. "And your female friend So Young, she also studies this breeding?" "Well, she studies botany, which includes plant breeding, yes." Veltar's mind raced. So this So Young was also trained in human breeding techniques. Perhaps she was learning from Taemin's grandmother to become a breeding specialist herself. "Does she help you with breeding matters?" Taemin laughed. "We work on projects together sometimes. She is very smart about plants." The door opened and Park So Young walked in. She was carrying a large bag full of books and had dirt under her fingernails from working in the university greenhouse. "Hello, Taemin. Hello, Veltar," she said with a bright smile. Veltar stared at her with new respect. Here was a human female training in breeding techniques. He wondered if he was about to witness some kind of consultation or training session. "How did your experiment go today?" Taemin asked her. "Very well. I successfully crossed 2 different rose varieties. If everything goes right, I should have new seedlings in a few weeks." Veltar quickly grabbed his recording device. Seedlings. She was talking about the results of breeding. This was exactly what his grandmother had described. "Was it difficult?" Taemin asked. The timing was tricky. I had to wait for exactly the right moment when both plants were ready. Then I had to be very careful with the pollination process. One wrong move and the whole thing would fail. Veltar nodded eagerly. Everything she said matched what he had heard on the phone call. The careful timing, the delicate process, the possibility of failure if not done correctly. Will you try to breed more types? Taman asked. Oh yes. My professor wants me to create at least 5 new varieties for my thesis project. Each one requires different techniques and environmental conditions. 5 new varieties, Veltar whispered to himself. Remembering that Timon's grandmother had mentioned the same number, So Young noticed Veltar's intense attention. Are you interested in plant breeding, Veltar? I am very interested in human breeding techniques, he replied seriously. So Young and Timon exchanged a look. They thought Veltar was just being his usual curious self about human activities. Maybe you could visit my grandmother's greenhouse sometime, Timon suggested. She loves showing off her breeding work. I would be honored to observe a master of breeding, Veltar said with deep respect. That night, as Timon slept, Veltar stayed awake making notes. He had discovered something amazing about humans. They had developed sophisticated breeding programs with experts, careful timing, perfect environmental controls, and specialized training. Their reproduction was not just biological, it was an art form. He decided he must learn everything about this human breeding system. Perhaps he could even help his friend Tai Min when the time came for him to participate in these breeding activities. After all, what were roommates for? The next morning, Veltar woke up early with a plan. He needed to learn more about human breeding techniques. If he was going to help his friend Tai Min, he had to understand this complex process properly. Friend Tai Min, Veltar said as his roommate got ready for class. When can I meet your grandmother to observe her breeding work? Taman smiled. She would love that. How about this weekend? She always works in her greenhouse on Saturday mornings. Excellent. I will prepare my research equipment, Taman laughed. It is just flowers, Veltar. You do not need any special equipment, but Veltar disagreed. This was serious scientific research. Human breeding was clearly more advanced than anything his species had developed. He needed to document everything properly. Saturday came quickly. Taman and Veltar took the train to the older part of Seoul where Grandmother Park lived. Her house was small but had a large glass greenhouse in the back garden. The morning sun made the glass walls shine like diamonds. Grandmother, this is my roommate Veltar, Taman said as they entered the greenhouse. Park Hyejin was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She wore old clothes and thick gloves, and her hands were dirty from working with soil. When she saw Veltar, she smiled warmly. Welcome, Veltar. Any friend of my grandson is welcome here. Do you want to see my beauties? Veltar looked around with wonder. The greenhouse was full of hundreds of orchids in every color he could imagine. The air was warm and humid, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. The temperature felt perfect, and the lighting was carefully controlled. This is amazing, Veltar whispered, pulling out his recording device. The environmental controls are so precise. 40 years of practice, Grandmother Park said proudly. Each type of orchid needs different conditions. Temperature, humidity, light, airflow. Everything must be just right for successful breeding. She led them to a special section where several orchids were kept in individual clear containers. These are my breeding pairs. See this white one? She is very special. Pure genetics, perfect form, strong constitution. And this purple giant here? He has the most amazing color and size I have ever seen. Veltar recorded every word carefully. She was talking about selecting breeding partners based on their best qualities. This was exactly like the genetic optimization programs his own species used, but much more sophisticated. How do you choose which ones to pair together? Veltar asked seriously. Experience and intuition. You look for complementary traits. One might be beautiful but fragile, so you pair it with one that is strong but plain. The children often get the best of both parents. Timon watched his grandmother explain her work to Veltar. The alien was taking notes like he was studying for the most important exam of his life. When do you know they are ready? Veltar asked. Timing is everything. You must wait for the right season when the conditions are perfect. Then you watch for the signs. The way they hold themselves, their color, their response to environmental changes. When everything is right, you bring them together very carefully. Grandmother Park demonstrated by opening one of the containers and gently touching a flower with a small brush. You must be very gentle. One wrong movement and you can damage them. The process takes patience and skill. Veltar watched with fascination as she moved the brush from one flower to another. In his mind, this was some kind of assisted reproduction technique. His own species just mixed genetic material and machines. This hands-on caring approach was revolutionary. How long before you see results? Veltar asked. Weeks or months, depending on the type. You must provide perfect care during this time. The right nutrients, proper temperature, protection from disease. Many attempts fail, but when it works, she gestured to a beautiful new orchid nearby. When it works, you create something that never existed before. After they left the greenhouse, Veltar was quiet during the train ride back to the university. His mind was processing everything he had learned. Human breeding was incredibly complex, requiring years of training, perfect environmental control, careful partner selection, and precise timing. Back in their dorm room, Veltar immediately began making detailed notes. Taman sat at his desk doing homework while his roommate worked frantically with his recording device and strange alien computer. Veltar, you seem very interested in my grandmother's hobby, Taman said. It is not a hobby, Veltar replied seriously. It is advanced reproductive science. Your grandmother is a master of genetic optimization. Taman smiled. She would love to hear you say that. She does take it very seriously. The next day, So-young came to study with Taman. She brought several textbooks about plant genetics and a laptop full of research data. Veltar immediately moved closer to observe. How is your breeding project going? Taman asked her. Better than expected. I think I will have viable offspring from 3 different crosses. My professor is very impressed with my techniques. Veltar started recording again. Here was a young human female discussing her breeding successes with confidence and skill. His species began reproduction training much later in life, but humans apparently started learning these advanced techniques while they were still students. What makes your techniques special? Veltar asked, so Young smiled. Careful preparation and patience. You cannot rush these things. I spend hours planning each cross, making sure the parent plants are healthy and compatible. Then I control every aspect of their environment until the process is complete. Environment control is very important in your breeding system, Veltar observed. Absolutely. Temperature, light, humidity, nutrients. Everything affects the success rate. I have been experimenting with different combinations to optimize results. Taman joined the conversation. So-young is one of the best students in her program. Her professor says she has natural talent for this work. Veltar was amazed. Humans identified breeding talent in their youth and provided advanced training. His own species treated reproduction as a simple biological function, but humans had turned it into an art and science. Will you continue this breeding work after your studies? Veltar asked So-young. I hope so. Maybe I will work with someone like Taman's grandmother, learning from experienced masters while developing my own techniques. A mentorship system, Veltar noted. Knowledge passed from master to student across generations. Exactly, So-young agreed. The best breeding techniques are learned through hands-on experience with experts. That evening, Veltar organized all his research. He had discovered that humans had developed an incredibly sophisticated reproductive system involving specialized training, master-apprentice relationships, environmental optimization, genetic selection, and artistic intuition. He decided he needed to learn much more. Perhaps he could even help his friend Taman when the time came for him to participate in breeding activities. After all, Taman was young and might benefit from having a scientifically trained assistant. Veltar began planning how he could contribute to human breeding research. His alien technology might be able to provide even better environmental controls and genetic analysis. This could be the greatest interspecies collaboration in history. Veltar spent the next week studying everything he could about human breeding. He watched videos online, read scientific papers, and observed human behavior patterns. Unfortunately, most of what he found was either too scientific for him to understand, or seemed to be about things other than what he had witnessed at Grandmother Park's greenhouse. But Veltar was determined to help his friend. He decided to use his advanced alien technology to create the perfect breeding environment in their dorm room. If Taman ever needed to participate in breeding activities, Veltar would make sure everything was optimal. He started by analyzing the air in their room. Using his blue scanning devices, he measured temperature, humidity, oxygen levels, and air purity. Then he compared these readings to what he remembered from Grandmother Park's greenhouse. The conditions are not suitable, Veltar muttered to himself as he worked. Too dry, temperature fluctuations, poor light spectrum. Over the next few days, Veltar began making modifications. He installed small devices around the room that controlled temperature and humidity. He added special lights that could change color and intensity throughout the day. He even set up a sound system that played the same classical music he had heard in the greenhouse. Taemin noticed the changes gradually. First, the room felt more comfortable. Then he realized the lighting was different, softer and warmer during the evening, brighter and cooler during the day. The air smelled fresher, too. Veltar, what are you doing to our room? Taemin asked one evening. Environmental optimization, Veltar replied seriously. I am creating ideal conditions for breeding activities. Breeding activities? What breeding activities? When you are ready to participate in the breeding process, the environment will be perfect, Veltar explained patiently. Your grandmother emphasized how important proper conditions are for success, Taemin laughed. Veltar, my grandmother breeds orchids. I do not breed anything. Not yet, Veltar agreed. But you are young and healthy. Someday you will surely want to participate in breeding. When that time comes, you will be prepared. Taemin shook his head but did not argue. Veltar's improvements actually made the room more comfortable, so he did not complain. Next, Veltar focused on nutrition. He had heard Grandmother Park mention the importance of proper nutrients for successful breeding. Using his alien technology, he began analyzing human food and creating what he believed were fertility-enhancing supplements. He synthesized powders and liquids based on the plant fertilizers he had observed in the greenhouse. If these nutrients helped orchids reproduce successfully, they should work even better for humans. Friend Taemin, Veltar said one morning, presenting a glass of strange green liquid. I have created optimal nutrition for breeding preparation. You should drink this daily. Taemin looked at the suspicious green drink. What is in it? Nitrogen compounds, phosphorus derivatives, potassium supplements, and trace minerals. All essential for reproductive success. Veltar, that sounds like plant fertilizer. Exactly. Your grandmother uses these same nutrients for her breeding program. Humans and plants are both living organisms. The same principles apply. Taemin politely declined the green drink. Veltar was disappointed but decided to try a different approach. He began studying human entertainment media to understand breeding rituals better. Unfortunately, his research led him to romantic movies and TV shows, which only confused him more. The humans in these programs seemed to perform elaborate courtship dances, exchange gifts, and create special environments with candles and flowers. Veltar decided these were important breeding preparation rituals. He began practicing what he believed were human fertility dances by combining movements he had seen in movies with traditional Nixari scientific ceremonies. The result was very strange. Lee Han-sol, Taemin's friend, visited one afternoon and found Veltar in the middle of one of these dance practice sessions. The alien was moving his arms in complex patterns while spinning slowly and humming a tune that sounded like a mixture of classical music and alien technology sounds. Taemin? Han-sol called out. What is your roommate doing? Taemin looked over and saw Veltar performing his elaborate dance routine. I have no idea. Veltar, what are you doing? Practicing human breeding preparation rituals, Veltar replied without stopping his dance. These ceremonial movements are essential for successful reproductive outcomes. Han-sol stared in amazement. Breeding preparation rituals? Yes. I have observed that humans perform specific dances and ceremonies before breeding activities. I must master these techniques to assist friend Taemin when needed. Han-sol looked at Taemin with wide eyes. Your alien roommate thinks you need help with breeding? I think there has been a misunderstanding, Taemin said slowly. But before he could explain, Kim Minho arrived. Minho was also a botany student who worked in the university greenhouse. He immediately noticed the improved lighting and air quality in the room. Wow, this place feels like a professional greenhouse, Minho said admiringly. The environmental controls are amazing. Thank you, Veltar said proudly. I have optimized conditions for breeding success. Breeding? What are you breeding in here? We are preparing for when friend Taemin begins his breeding activities, Veltar explained. Minho laughed. Good luck with that. I can barely get lucky with my plants in the lab, and that is with professional equipment. Veltar stopped dancing immediately. Lucky with plants? Luck is required for breeding success? Well, not exactly luck, Minho explained. But you need good timing, proper technique, and sometimes things just work better than expected. Interesting, Veltar said, making mental notes. So breeding success involves both skill and fortune. This explains why your grandmother mentioned timing being so important. Whose grandmother? Minho asked. Taemin's grandmother is a master of breeding techniques, Veltar said with deep respect. She has taught me much about environmental control and partner selection. Minho looked confused but impressed. She must be really good with plants then. The best I have ever observed, Veltar confirmed. After his friends left, Taemin sat down with Veltar to try to understand what was happening. Veltar, I think you might be confused about something. What exactly do you think breeding is? The process by which humans create offspring through careful partner selection, environmental optimization, and precise timing, Veltar replied confidently. Your grandmother has mastered this art and your friend So Young is learning these techniques. Oh no, Taemin said quietly, finally understanding the problem. Veltar, my grandmother breeds orchids, plants, flowers, not humans. But the techniques are the same, Veltar insisted. Environmental control, partner selection, timing, nutrition, everything applies to human reproduction as well. Taemin realized this misunderstanding was bigger than he had thought. Veltar had spent weeks preparing their room for human breeding activities that would never happen. Veltar, we need to talk about this more. But first, can you please stop making those green drinks? They smell terrible. Of course, friend Taemin. When you are ready to begin breeding preparation, you will tell me. Taemin sighed. He needed to figure out how to explain this misunderstanding without hurting his roommate's feelings. Veltar had worked so hard to create what he thought was the perfect breeding environment. 2 weeks later, Veltar decided the time had come. He had observed Taemin carefully and noticed several signs that he interpreted as breeding readiness. Taemin had been talking more often with So Young, spending extra time on his appearance, and seemed happier than usual. In Veltar's mind, these were clear indicators that his friend was preparing for breeding activities. The alien spent an entire day making final preparations. He adjusted all the environmental controls to what he believed were optimal levels. He arranged the furniture to create more open space for breeding ceremonies. He prepared special lighting sequences and organized his recording equipment to document this historic moment. Most importantly, Veltar sent messages to other alien exchange students in the university. This would be the first time any of them had witnessed human breeding techniques. It was a perfect opportunity for interspecies scientific collaboration. That evening, Taemin returned from his classes to find their dorm room completely transformed. The lighting was dim and colorful, classical music was playing softly, and the air felt thick and humid like a tropical jungle. Veltar stood in the center of the room wearing what appeared to be ceremonial clothing, a strange combination of his regular clothes decorated with flowers and small alien devices. Friend Taemin, Veltar announced formally, the optimal breeding environment has been achieved. All conditions are perfect for reproductive success. What? Taemin dropped his backpack and stared at the room. Veltar, what is all this? I have prepared everything for your breeding session. Temperature is precisely controlled. Humidity is optimal. Lighting follows natural circadian patterns, and air quality is perfect. The ceremonial space is ready. 3 other alien students were sitting quietly in one corner of the room, holding recording devices and looking very serious. Taemin recognized them as other exchange students from the dormitory. Why are there other aliens in our room? Taemin asked nervously. Witnesses are important for significant cultural events, Veltar explained. This will be the first time any of us have observed human breeding techniques. We must document everything for our research. Breeding techniques? Taemin's voice went up an octave. Veltar, what exactly do you think is going to happen here? You will demonstrate the human breeding process that your grandmother taught you. I have created the perfect environment based on her greenhouse. Your partner So Young will arrive soon, and together you will show us how humans perform reproductive activities. Taemin felt his face turn bright red. Oh no. Veltar, there has been a huge misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? Veltar asked, looking concerned. Have I prepared something incorrectly? The environmental readings are exactly what your grandmother uses for her breeding program. My grandmother breeds plants, Taman said loudly. Flowers, orchids, not people. Veltar looked confused. But the techniques are the same. Environmental control, partner selection, careful timing. No, they are not the same at all. Taman ran his hands through his hair. Plants and humans are completely different. The door opened and So Young walked in carrying her study materials. She stopped immediately when she saw the strange lighting, heard the classical music, and noticed the alien audience sitting in the corner. What is happening here? She asked carefully. Veltar bowed respectfully to her. Welcome, breeding specialist So Young. I have prepared the optimal environment for you and friend Taman to demonstrate human reproductive techniques. So Young's eyes went very wide. Reproductive techniques? Veltar thinks you and I are going to breed. Like my grandmother's orchids, Taman explained, his face still bright red. So Young stared at them for a moment, then began laughing so hard she had to sit down. Oh my goodness! Veltar, you think we are going to reproduce like flowers? Is this not correct? Veltar asked, looking very confused now. Your techniques are the same as what I observed in the greenhouse. Environmental control, partner compatibility, timing, nutrition, no. So Young said, still laughing. Those techniques are for plant breeding. For making new types of flowers by mixing pollen from different parent plants. But humans are living organisms too, Veltar protested. The same scientific principles should apply. Taman sat down on his bed, feeling embarrassed and relieved at the same time. Veltar, human reproduction is different, much more complicated, and much more private. The three alien witnesses looked disappointed. They had been expecting to observe an important scientific demonstration. So Young, being a botany student, understood both sides of the confusion. She stood up and addressed Veltar kindly. Veltar, I think I understand what happened. You heard us talking about plant breeding and thought we meant human breeding. Are they not the same process? Veltar asked. Not at all. When I cross two different rose varieties, I take pollen from one flower and put it on another flower. The result is seeds that grow into new plants with traits from both parents. Yes, exactly. Genetic material from two sources creates offspring with combined characteristics. That part is similar, So Young agreed. But the process is completely different. Plants cannot choose their partners or create romantic relationships. They cannot fall in love or build emotional connections, love, Veltar asked. Emotional connections? These are part of human breeding? Taman nodded. Human relationships are about much more than just reproduction. We form emotional bonds, share experiences, support each other through difficult times. This is far more complex than I understood, Veltar admitted. My species reproduces through simple genetic material exchange and laboratory conditions. We do not have these emotional components, So Young sat down next to Veltar. That is what makes human relationships special. Yes, we can reproduce, but that is just one small part of a much bigger emotional and social connection. And it is extremely private, Taman added firmly. Humans do not perform reproductive activities in front of audiences or as scientific demonstrations. Veltar looked around at the elaborate environmental controls he had created, then at his fellow alien students who were packing up their recording equipment with disappointed expressions. I have made a significant error, Veltar said slowly. I thought I was helping friend Taman prepare for an important biological function. Instead, I have created an embarrassing situation. It is okay, Taman said kindly. You were trying to help. You just misunderstood what kind of breeding we were talking about. But now I am very curious about human emotional bonding, Veltar admitted. This sounds much more interesting than simple genetic exchange. So Young smiled. Maybe we can teach you about human relationships properly. But first, can we turn off all these special lights and open a window? It feels like a jungle in here. As Veltar began shutting down his elaborate breeding environment, the other alien students left quietly. Taman felt grateful that the misunderstanding had been resolved without anyone getting too embarrassed. Veltar, Taman said, as his roommate packed away his equipment. Next time you want to help me with something, maybe ask more questions first. Agreed, Veltar replied. Human culture is more complex than I realized. I have much to learn about emotional relationships and social connections. We will teach you, So Young promised. But maybe we should start with something simpler than reproduction. The next morning, Veltar woke up feeling embarrassed but also curious. The misunderstanding about breeding had been awkward. but it had opened his eyes to something fascinating about humans. Their relationships were far more complex than anything his species experienced. "Friend Taimin," Veltar said as they ate breakfast, "I would like to understand human emotional bonding better. Will you teach me?" Taimin smiled. "Of course, but maybe we should start with friendship first. That is easier to explain than romantic relationships. What makes friendship different from other relationships? Friends choose to spend time together because they enjoy each other's company. They help each other, share experiences, and care about each other's happiness." Veltar thought about this. "Like what we do? You help me understand human customs, and I try to help you with things like environmental controls." "Exactly. We are friends, Veltar. That is why you wanted to help me with breeding, even though you misunderstood what I needed." This made Veltar feel warm inside in a way he had never experienced before. His species did not form emotional bonds. They worked together when necessary but did not seek each other's company for enjoyment. "I think I like being friends," Veltar said quietly. Later that day, So Young came to visit with a special proposal. "Veltar, would you like to visit Taimin's grandmother again? I think she would enjoy meeting you properly now that we understand each other better." "I would be honored, but I feel embarrassed about my misunderstanding." "Do not worry," Taimin said. "Grandmother loves teaching people about her orchids. She will be happy to explain everything properly." That weekend, all three of them went to visit Grandmother Park. When they arrived at the greenhouse, she greeted Veltar warmly. "Veltar, Taimin told me you are very interested in my orchids. Come, let me show you my latest success." She led them to a beautiful new orchid with purple and white stripes. "This is the result of crossing my white beauty with the purple giant. Look how the colors combined." Veltar stared at the flower with new understanding. "The genetic traits from both parents are visible in the offspring." "Exactly. But it took many attempts to get it right. Most of the seeds did not grow, and some of the plants that did grow were weak or unhealthy. Success in plant breeding requires patience and acceptance of failure. In my species, reproduction has a very high success rate," Veltar said. "We mix genetic material in controlled laboratory conditions." "That sounds very efficient," Grandmother Park said. "But where is the joy in it? Half the pleasure of breeding orchids is the surprise of seeing what each new combination will create." "Joy? Surprise, these are emotions, not scientific outcomes." So Young joined the conversation. "That is what makes human activities special, Veltar. We do not just accomplish biological functions. We find beauty, excitement, and satisfaction in the process." Grandmother Park nodded. "When I successfully create a new orchid variety, I feel proud and happy. When an experiment fails, I feel disappointed but also motivated to try again. These emotions make the work meaningful." Veltar realized this was what he had been missing about human relationships. They were not just functional partnerships. They involved emotions that made experiences more significant. Is this why friend Taimin and So Young spend time together? For the emotional satisfaction. "Partly," Taimin said. "We enjoy each other's company. We laugh together, share our thoughts and feelings, and support each other when things are difficult. And when we work together on projects," So Young added, "we accomplish more than either of us could alone. But we also have fun doing it." Grandmother Park smiled at Veltar. "Would you like to help me with a breeding experiment? I can teach you the proper techniques for plant reproduction." "I would be very honored." She handed him a small brush and guided him to two orchids in separate containers. "This white one has pollen that we want to transfer to the purple one. You must be very gentle and precise." Under her careful instruction, Veltar learned to collect pollen from one flower and transfer it to another. The process required steady hands, patience, and attention to detail. "Very good," Grandmother Park said as Veltar completed his first successful plant breeding attempt. "You have natural talent for this work." Veltar felt a strange new emotion, pride in accomplishing something difficult and beautiful. "Will we know if it was successful?" "In a few weeks we will see if seeds develop. Then we must wait months to see what kind of plant grows. Patience is the most important skill in breeding. I understand now why you find this work satisfying. It is not just about creating new genetic combinations. It is about the challenge, the hope, the surprise of discovery." "Exactly," she said with delight. "You learn quickly, Veltar." On the train ride back to the university, Veltar was quiet but thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. "I think I understand human relationships better now. They are like your grandmother's orchid breeding." "How so?" So Young asked. Both require patience, care, and acceptance that not everything will work perfectly. Both involve emotions that make the process meaningful, rather than just functional, and both create something new and beautiful that did not exist before. Tae-min smiled. That is a very good way to think about it. Friendship has created something new in me, Veltar continued. Emotions and experiences I never had before. It is like I am a new variety of Veltar. Back in their dorm room, Veltar began writing a research paper about his experiences. But instead of focusing on human reproduction techniques, he wrote about the complexity of human emotional bonds and how they enhanced every aspect of human life. 3 weeks later, Grandmother Park called with exciting news. The orchid breeding experiment that Veltar had helped with was successful. Seeds had developed and were beginning to grow. We should name the new variety, she suggested when they visited to see the tiny seedlings. What about Friendship's Bloom? Veltar suggested. To honor what I have learned about human relationships. Perfect, Grandmother Park agreed. A flower created through cooperation between species, just like our friendship. That evening, as Tae-min studied and Veltar worked on his research, the alien reflected on everything that had changed since his misunderstanding about breeding. He had learned that humans did not just reproduce. They formed complex emotional bonds that enriched their entire lives. Friend Tae-min, Veltar said quietly, thank you for being patient with my misunderstanding and teaching me about friendship. Thank you for being such a good friend, Veltar, and for helping my grandmother create a beautiful new orchid. Veltar smiled, an expression he had learned from watching humans. His species might be more advanced in technology, but humans had mastered something far more valuable, the art of creating meaningful connections with others. The research paper he was writing would not just be about human reproduction or even human relationships. It would be about humanity's greatest achievement, their ability to find joy, meaning, and growth through emotional bonds with others, even across species barriers. Outside their window, the lights of Seoul twinkled like stars, and in a small greenhouse across the city, a new orchid continued growing, a living symbol of what could be created when different beings work together with patience, care, and friendship.